Thank you, Mr. Mayor. We are recording.
Okay. Thank you, Mr. Taylor. Welcome everyone, both virtual and audience, to our regular council meeting of Wednesday, April 20th, 2022. Meeting is now called to order. Meeting is open now to statements of no more than 5 minutes. Members of the public to no more than 2 minutes of length each. Is there anyone so desire? See none. Item 3. Any late additions or deletions to the agenda?
None, Mr. Mayor.
Thank you. Someone please move that the April 20th, 2022 regular council meeting agenda be adopted. Councillor Howe, second Councillor Leach. We'll call the question. All those in favor? Carried. So move to item 4.1, delegation. We have Kirsten, Todd, I think, and Curtis, is it, from Shaw, giving us an infrastructure update. Welcome.
Well, thank you very much, Mayor. Really appreciate it. The team, both the Shaw team and Curtis Rowe from Rogers, we appreciate your time tonight. Maybe we'll just, if we could start, we'll just start with maybe a round of introductions, if that's okay. Of course, my name is Kirsten Enemark, and I am the Director of Government Relations for Shaw here in British Columbia. I'm joined this evening with Todd Musat, who is our Director of Network Infrastructure, who's been taking the lead on the Shaw fiber backbone build. I'm also joined today with Alicia Carter, who is our Manager of SMB Sales with Shaw Business, and Curtis Rowe, who is the Director of Community Engagement for Rogers Communications.
Hello, everyone.
I've just put together a quick deck here that I thought I would run through. Just, you know, again, we thought we would take this opportunity, of course, to speak a little bit about the upcoming acquisition of Rogers of Shaw Communications, the two companies coming together, and what will that mean. We thought we would also provide an update on the Shaw Fiber Backbone project. From there, of course, this is a fiber backbone project. It's an open access network that does support additional broadband services in the region, both mobile services and otherwise. So we thought we would speak a little bit of some of the investments that Rogers is looking forward to making into the future. And then from there, if there are any questions from Mayor and Council, we're happy to answer your questions. So first of all, you know, as you are aware, Rogers is in the process of acquiring Shaw Communications. It is a friendly acquisition because really our networks complement each other. And by bringing the two networks together, we believe that we're going to be providing more competition in Western Canada. We will be able to accelerate connecting underserved communities. We will be able to accelerate the delivery of next generation services like 5G, and really better prepare Western Canada for that next generation of moving into the digital economy. So just very briefly, just to give a little bit of the reasoning behind the two companies coming together. As I mentioned before, our networks really do complement each other. About 80% of our networks really do complement each other, particularly in Western Canada and British Columbia. Shaw is very strong on the fiber wireline network front. Rogers is very strong on the wireless cellular front. So really by combining those two network assets, we'll be able to not only, we believe, better connect underserved communities, but for a number of communities in Western Canada that are really single served, where maybe there's one telecommunications company that's really providing services, another telecommunications company of similar size and similar, but I should say like our toolkit is similar, we believe can bring more competition to communities in Western Canada. The commitment that Rogers has also made is to really collaborate with Indigenous communities to find ways to connect communities in a variety of different ways, including the creation of more Indigenously owned internet service providers. So there's a commitment to really work with rural communities and Indigenous communities to find that community-driven solution to improve access to high-speed internet, to make sure that there's cellular service, and of course the technologies that are to evolve into the future. By having the two companies come together, we're also expanding our toolkit in terms of connecting many of the rural communities. We can connect communities with cellular or fiber to the premise, but also fixed wireless, for example, or maybe there's a mixture of those different technologies and those different network configurations. And then lastly, by having the Shaw Fiber and then the Rogers wireless assets, it will allow us to further accelerate 5G technology. And that's sort of the next evolution that supports IoT and machine-to-machine technologies, really so important for that digital economy. I'm flipping different buttons here. I thought I would turn things over to Curtis to then speak more specifically of the commitments that Rogers has made tied to the acquisition. So if we turn things over to Curtis.
Thanks, Kirsten. And again, thank you so much for having us today. We're very excited about the coming together of Shaw and Rogers. As Kirsten mentioned, I think the key term is accelerate. So we're looking forward to being able to invest heavily in Western Canada. And this slide showcases some of those commitments that we have made. Primarily $1 billion for Western Canada to expand into remote, rural, and Indigenous communities. And out of that $1 billion, $450 million has been earmarked specifically for British Columbia. And we know that there's many highway passes in remote communities that have been struggling with connectivity for some time. So we're very excited to continue to work with communities. And like Kirsten had mentioned as well, taking a very different approach and working directly with communities to have community-driven solutions. So whether that be supporting an Indigenous community with the creation of their own community-owned and led ISP, or going in and solving network issues or connectivity gaps that communities and residents throughout the province have been facing. We're further investing in our wireless network with a $2.5 billion investment in 5G technology and overall $3 billion in technology investments in the West. So our short-term plan post-acquisition is about $6.5 billion that Rogers will be investing in the West. Post-acquisition, we're also very proud that there will be net 3,000 new jobs created in Western Canada. So a lot of opportunities with this, with a new entity and having a much more focused Western presence. That also includes a technology center based out of Calgary with 500 IT professionals. And then finally on this slide here, we're also really proud of a program that we run in the East called Connected for Success. We know that as we go into some of these communities and we work to enhance our network, give access to fiber or other internet solutions, we know that these technologies are still out of hand for some individuals. Connected for Success is designed exactly for that, helping with low income and single parent families, seniors and other marginalized group with access to low cost subsidized internet for as low as $9.99 per month. So ensuring that we're also looking at that social divide and trying to help communities to bridge that divide as we're going and we're expanding into further networks. Kirsten, you want to flip to the next one? And I think we'll hand it over to Todd to speak to this one.
Yes, thanks, Curtis. So really an update on the fiber backbone project that Shaw has been conducting for the last more or less 3 years. So like it says, started in principal construction started around a year and a half ago, and we're pleased to more or less communicate today that principal construction on the backbone is complete, that we have placed all the cable and we have we've completed our testing. So we're now in the second phase of this construction, which is now network activation and upgrades within our facility within Lillooet, and also the network builds that we have of the internet access points along the corridor. So that will be our focus right now. So that will take around another couple of months of work. With that completion, then we're looking to start looking at upgrading the services within Lillooet and community. So that's really is the great thing about what we are able to provide today is that principal construction is complete along the corridor from connection point at Highway 97 and 99 all the way into Lillooet. So maybe the next slide, Kirsten. So upon that completion of the main sector of the highway project, we are now focusing on our remaining, which is more or less from the town of Lillooet, following Highway 99 towards Seton Lake. This is around 5 kilometers of construction that we have remaining, and that will take us to the edge, like I said, to Seton Lake, where we will connect into the Bell portion of the work, and which will connect us then finally into our completed access that we have at Mount Currie, which now will complete the whole entire ring right from Whistler to Vancouver. So that will be the completion of the project. So our target is on the fall of or later this year of 2022 to have this complete, and then the subsequent linkage of the marine fiber from Seton Lake to Anderson Lake, and then to Darcy, and then to Mount Currie. We have some, we're working with BC Hydro, and we have some preliminary design, and that there's around 60 or so poles that will be needed remediation along this corridor to accommodate our attachment of the cable that we're going to be placing.
Thanks, Todd. So just to highlight that this fiber optic line, I think we've mentioned before to Mayor and Council in past presentations, it is a fiber line that does start from Whistler, ends at Hat Creek, or really Cache Creek, and it's really going to be improving the Shaw network in terms of greater resiliency, greater dependency, but also what it will do is for all of the households and businesses in Lillooet who are currently Shaw customers, they will be experiencing an upgrade in service in the next few months ahead as activation does roll out. So for public sector buildings, for businesses, for households who do have access to the Shaw network today, those upgraded services will be available shortly. But what this fiber also does, it allows us to then build upon it other broadband services, further connecting households, adding cellular service in the area. And that's really another phase that Todd and his team is looking at, is with the activated fiber, what additional households can we connect in and around Lillooet, as well as working with communities along the route in terms of identifying opportunities to deliver high-speed internet as well. And on that note, now that we've got the backbone in place, I'll turn things over to Curtis to speak a little bit of some of the plans that Rogers is looking at.
Great, thanks, Kirsten. So what you're looking at here is, we call it a cluster, and it's basically a area, the polygon that is surrounded, the gray polygon around the highway there, and all the communities from Lillooet almost all the way to Cache Creek. As we're looking at a potential area, it is first identified based on underserved homes. So homes that do not meet the 50-10 rule as what the federal government classified as an underserved household. But we're also looking at cellular coverage along that route. So similar to what Kirsten was saying, as we are able to post-acquisition leverage the existing infrastructure that Shaw has, plus also some projects like what they're working on right now, being able to leverage that to address those cellular coverage gaps along the highways and connect directly with communities to find out what are their service challenges that they're having. In some cases, that may mean actually building out solutions such as fiber to the home, fixed wireless access solutions, or simply filling in some of those cellular coverage issues if there are any, if there is a coverage gap. And along this route, you will see some of those red dots, and that's just an initial go through that our engineering teams have had to be able to look at to have continual coverage along the highway there. What would we be looking at for cellular towers? In this case, we're looking at, I believe it's about 8 towers in total that would be required. This is the very initial pass. And as we go through this process, again, we engage directly with communities, both municipal, Indigenous communities, and we have similar conversations to this to really understand, would they be able to benefit from this new fiber distribution that Shaw has? And post-acquisition with our $450 million investment for BC, would this be one of the ideal areas that we would be investing in? We have received very positive feedback so far in our conversations, and we would be looking to fill any of those gaps that Shaw has not already been working with communities to address. And when we have the new co in place, we would be looking to work with those communities to further those enhancements. I'd love to open it up for any questions. Oh, and actually, sorry, Kirsten just brought up a secondary view. So this new pink, the pink shading here shows with these new towers placed where we would be able to actually have fixed wireless access internet along that path. Again, this is a very initial tabletop exercise. So as we work with communities, this will be further refined. In some cases, fixed wireless access is the ideal solution. Oftentimes, if you have much less density with the population, say homes that have several 100-meter long driveways or on acreages, fixed wireless access can be a great solution in those cases. And in some where they are near one of the distribution points, then we would also be looking at possibly fiber directly to the premise within some of these communities as well. Okay, thank you, Kirsten.
Thank you, Kirsten. Thank you, folks. Very encouraging, really good news, and exceptionally good news. And we're encouraged by the progress. I remember, Kirsten, we met almost 1.5 years or a little bit more ago. And I think the progress you guys have made to this point is pretty good, fairly exceptional. I'm really happy to see the emphasis being placed on cellular, especially on 99 North. About 10 days ago, Minister Barr met with mayors and regional district chairs for the southern region as well as Vancouver Island, and mentioned that they've just announced $830 million federal and provincial joint funding. And they're sort of throwing it out, including $289 million, part of the BC provincial budget. That kind of threw it out, and I could sense by some of the questions that were coming out, there's now going to be an onslaught of applications by municipalities and regional districts. And the point is that, hey, where and how do we go about it when we see how you've laid out the program that you have in front of us? Is there any merit, obviously, in joining up and utilizing your expertise and assuring that our area is getting the best opportunities for anything on connectivity? Minister Barr and Minister Osborne both stated that connectivity, as you people have laid out, is very important, and I think your advancement of this is exceptional. So what I'm asking is, without you fully understanding where this thing is leading, but I just feel a mob of crawling over each other trying to get at this money. With your background, can you give us some guidance and maybe some assistance? We're not very well staffed, and I think all of council, we've discussed it many times, based on wildfire season, based on the floods, we really need cellular, not only 99 North, we need cellular 99 South, and we really need cellular on 12 as well. And I was a person that had the ability to utilize the system down the canyon, Autotel. So certainly something where this is pretty skookum given the terrain of the Fraser River all the way from Cache Creek down to the lower mainland. So once upon a time, there was very good or decent communication capability. So if you could address that briefly, and then I'll see if council has got any other questions or comments, but well done, and really, Boyd, and thank you for your efforts, both Shaw and Roger.
Well, thank you very much. And, maybe on this point too, as Todd was saying, we've been actively in construction now for many months, really over a year, and we really have appreciated the help and the support of the district. We know that, building fiber underground can disturb some operations and certainly maybe interfere with your regular municipal activities. So we really do appreciate the patience and the support of the district as we've done this work. And as I said, that the backbone really is that foundation that allows us to then further expand connectivity like cellular, like connecting households or fixed wireless service. It looks like a telecommunications tower where, households and businesses could have access to high-speed internet through a wireless connection. We are, just to confirm, we are participating in the province's request to participate process, where the province is inviting service providers to provide information on where we have an interest in investing, where we have an interest in expanding our network. So Shaw and Rogers have agreed to participate in that process. And we do look forward to the broadband funding program with the funds that you had mentioned, Mayor Busey, that these are funds that the province is then going to put together a program, a broadband funding program that we hope to have access to when it opens. We believe it'll be opening maybe as early as this summer.
Any questions, comments from council? Councillor Howe?
Thank you so much for the presentation and keeping us up to date on the progress. It's all very exciting information to have. I'm curious, Kirsten, when you mentioned a few times moving into the digital economy. And so, when I think about the digital economy, there's a few different ideas that come to mind, especially as we look at broadening our capacity for business in Lillooet. And what those needs of any future businesses might look like service-wise. So when you're speaking to moving into the digital economy, what are some things that come to mind for you? What are you speaking to?
Well, I mean, I'll turn to Alicia too for Alicia's comment, but maybe just to start it off, it could be something as simple as having that remote workforce that, if there are businesses that do support a remote workforce, as you can imagine, a business in Vancouver, if it has a remote workforce, then a resident in Vancouver doesn't necessarily need to live in Vancouver. That resident can then move to a rural community or to a village where there's a great sense of community and really work from that location, providing there's access to high-speed internet. So that would be maybe one very simple illustration, but maybe I'll turn to my colleague Alicia to talk a little bit about the digital economy and what does that mean for businesses moving into the future.
Yeah, absolutely. So with this expansion and with bringing in the fiber and the build that we're doing in the area, it's going to allow us to offer the full suite of products that we do in the larger cities, such as Kelowna, Vancouver, Victoria, everything from security products to the remote VPN products like Kirsten was mentioning, fiber solutions, symmetrical up and down solutions as well. Right now, Lillooet has a very limited television package, a very limited internet package at a 30 meg per second service, which in areas such as Kelowna, Vancouver, Calgary, you're looking at 1.5 gigs up or download speed. So the service is going to be tenfold compared to what you guys are experiencing now, which is only going to increase productivity and efficiency within businesses.
Okay, thank you.
Yeah, you're welcome.
Councillor Hoppe?
Thank you. Thank you for your presentation. I think we've waited a long time for this, but so I've just got a few questions. So Roger historically doesn't have any mobility service here. So now that they're kind of jumping on with Shaw, that mobility will be all inclusive to us. And so currently, just so I understand this in my head, right, that so Shaw will have its own dedicated high-speed kind of internet trunk instead of, because I think that currently Shaw leases from TELUS, correct?
That is
So
correct.
that would free up TELUS. And so those customers should be a little bit quicker with their internet service as well. So, and does this pertain to like mobility, internet and cable for Shaw customers? And last question, does it go out to Highway 40 to Goldbridge?
So if the question is, you know, with this fiber backbone, once Shaw does activate service, for those who currently have a connection to Shaw services, it will be increasing, you know, internet speeds to really, the minimum will be 1 gig download. And then, as Alicia was mentioning before, our full suite of video streaming services, digital phone, as well as business products and services. So when we think of smart Wi-Fi or smart security, this will allow really the full suite of products and services that Shaw offers in urban centers will then be available in Lillooet. So we're looking forward to that launch. We're all very, very excited about that. But to your point, like then what other services can come about? Well, you know, Shaw does not currently have cellular services in Lillooet, even though we do have services that are fiber fed. We do not have cellular services. Rogers, in the meantime, does have a very robust cellular network in British Columbia, and Rogers, with the acquisition of Shaw, has made a commitment to further invest in network services, has identified the highway corridor and communities along the highway corridor for cellular service, which will in the future allow us to then bundle those services, one would think.
Thank you.
Any further comments, questions? Once again, thank you to you all, and great news that you bring us, and you have our full support, and we look forward to progress over the next few months of the year ahead. Appreciate your efforts and energies, and thank you once again for coming to see us.
Well, thank you so much, and look forward to spending more time in Lillooet. Okay.
Thank you.
Okay.
Okay. All right, we'll move to item 4.2, our financial statements. Our auditor, Taylor, is there to present to us.
Can you hear me?
Yeah.
Perfect. Yeah, so I guess I'll just get started here. Just let me full screen this. Yeah, so my name is Taylor Turkington from Bestwick Hildebrandt Lund and up in Prince George, BC. And I had the pleasure of working on the audit for the District of Lillooet as at December 31st, 2021. I've been working on this audit for, I think this is the 5th or 6th year now. So, and I just want to say thanks again to Joni for all her help. And with this year's audit, it was a pleasure working with her again. And yeah, we'll just get started here. If you have any questions, just tell me to stop and we can go over it, or you can wait to the end. It's up to you. So here we have the management's responsibility for financial reporting. This just states that the financial statements are the responsibility of mayor and management and mayor and council, and that we just perform the audit procedures on these financial statements and give our input in relation to preparing the statements. Page 2 here, the independent auditors report. This is essentially what we are engaged to do as auditors. This is where we provide our opinion on the financial statements. So in our opinion, the accompanying financial statements present fairly in all material respects the financial position of the District of Lillooet as at December 31st, 2021. So what that means is this is a clean audit. We have no issues to note or bring to the attention of mayor and council. Further in this auditor's report, we have the responsibilities of management and those charged with governance. So again, this just states that the statements are the responsibility of management and mayor and council, and we are just auditing the actual statements. The auditor's responsibilities for the audit of the financial statements. This just gives a sort of breakdown about what we did and the procedures we sort of took when completing the audit for the year. So that includes identifying and assessing any risks of material misstatement, understanding any relevant internal controls and procedures, make sure that the accounting policies being used are reasonable, and ensure that the overall presentation of the financial statements follow the public sector accounting standards. That brings us to the statement of financial position, also known as the balance sheet. So the total financial assets for the year are 12.8 million, up from the 10.4 million in 2020. The majority of the increase is due to the increase in cash and cash equivalents, and that's due to an increase in the net income for the year and increase in the amount of deferred revenue at the end of the year. Also to note, receivables went down by about $600,000, and that's just a timing item. There just happened to be more funding received at the end of 2021 when compared to 2020. Total liabilities for 2021 equal 3.1 million, up from the 2.2 million in 2020. The increase is mostly due to the $900,000 increase in deferred revenues. And that increase is due to additional funding that was received in 2021 that is for projects that are going to be completed in 2022 or 2023. So that together results in net financial assets of $9.7 million. Non-financial assets, so that's prepaid expenses and tangible capital assets. Prepaid expenses are very similar to last year at $22,000, with tangible capital assets decreasing slightly to 28.3 million, down from 28.4 million in 2020. And that's just due to the, there were some capital asset purchases, but there was more amortization on capital assets during the year. All that together results in an accumulated surplus at the end of the year of $38 million, up from the 36.7 million in 2020. Next, we have the statement of operations, also known as the income statement. So for 2021, revenues increased to 7.4 million from the 6.1 million in 2020. That increase is mostly due to this about a little over $1 million increase in grants and government transfers to 2.4 million. And that's just because more grants were received during 2021 when compared to 2020. Total expenses for the year were 5.9 million, up slightly from the 5.5 million in 2020. And that increase is just a slight increase across the board in most of the different types or the different segments of general government, development services, etc. All that together results in an excess revenues over expenses, or net income, of $1.5 million. There was also a loss on disposal of capital assets during the year of $117,000, resulting in an annual surplus for the year of $1.3 million. And again, all that together with the accumulated surplus at the beginning of the year results in an accumulated surplus at the end of 2021 of $38 million. The next page, we have the statement of changes in net financial assets. So this gives a breakdown of where the different values and changes of occur in the net financial assets. So during 2021, there were capital expenses, or so capital asset purchases of almost $1.4 million against amortization expenses of, again, $1.4 million. With the loss and proceeds on disposals of capital assets resulting in a $1.5 million increase in net financial assets. Again, resulting in a total net financial assets at the end of 2021 of $9.7 million, up from the 8.1 in 2020. Next, we have the statement of cash flows. So what this does is gives a sort of snapshot of where cash came from and where cash was spent during the year, broken up between operating activities, investing activities, financing activities, and other activities. So total cash flows from operating activities resulted in an increase in cash of $4.4 million. Payments or cash flows from investing activities resulted in a decrease in cash of almost $10,000, with cash flows from financing activities also decreasing cash by $25,000. And there were purchases of tangible capital assets, as mentioned before, of almost $1.4 million, which also decreased cash. All that together results in a net cash increase during the year of $3 million, which when added with the opening cash from 2020 results in cash at the end of the year of $10.7 million. Are there any questions on anything that I've gone over so far?
Council? Done so far, Bill? Carry on.
Okay. So that's the bulk of the main sort of face of the financial statements. Now we get to the notes to the financial statements, which just give more information about the numbers that we've already discussed. I'll go through these with you and we'll sort of touch base on any of the ones that I think are important or would be of interest to Mayor and Council. If I miss any or have any other questions, just please let me know. So note 1, significant accounting policies. This just gives a description of the different accounting policies that the District of Lillooet follows when preparing its financial statements, such as the basis of accounting using the accrual basis, how inventory is held for resale, revenue recognition for the different types of revenue broken up between taxation revenue, utility rates, the sale of services, grants and government transfers, and investment income. So that just describes how and when revenue is recognized for each of those different types of revenue transactions. And then cash and cash equivalents, just the fact that cash and cash equivalents consists of all cash and short-term investments that mature within 3 months of the year end. And then also deferred revenue just gives a description that while funds may be received, if the revenue cannot be recognized either due to requirements in the agreement or the expenses have yet to be incurred, then the revenue would be deferred. Tangible capital assets. This note just gives a description of the different types of capital assets and how they are amortized over their useful life between buildings, land, equipment, etc., and anywhere from 5 to 100 years, depending on what the capital asset is. Right. Note 2 and 3 here, they just give a breakdown of what makes up cash and cash equivalents as well as the investments. So the investments are just MFA investments are held with MFA in the government focused ultra short bond and the MFA money market fund. Note 4 just gives a breakdown of where the different types of receivables are held at the end of the year, broken up between property taxes receivable, utilities receivable, just general trade accounts receivable, and other governments and agencies receivable. Note 7, accounts payable and accrued liabilities. This gives a breakdown of where the different types of accounts payable are held at the end of the year, broken up between just general trade accounts payable, payroll amounts, accounts payable, amounts still payable to other governments and agencies, and then also contractor holdbacks and other deposits payable. Note 8, deferred revenue. Just list the different types of deferred revenue that are held at the end of the year. So as you can see, the majority of the deferred revenue is between the COVID-19 Safe Restart Grant and the other deferred revenue for different grants that have been received. Note 11 is accumulated surplus. This just gives a breakdown of what makes up the different surpluses in unappropriated surplus and appropriated surplus, as well as the balances of the different reserve funds at the end of 2021. Note 12, long-term debt. So this just gives a breakdown of, this would give a breakdown of the different balances of the different types of long-term debt that are held by the district. During 2021, the remainder of the debt was paid off. So as at December 31st, 2021, there is actually no long-term debt held by the district. Note 13, tangible capital assets. This just gives a breakdown of the different types of additions and disposals, as well as the amortization of the different types of capital assets that are held by the district for 2020 and 2021. As mentioned before, you can see that there was total capital asset additions of $1.3 million and total amortization expenses of $1.3 million. Note 14, segmented reporting. This is a requirement for all government or public sector accounting standards entities. So the different types of segments need to be discussed and included in the financial statements, along with the description of what each of those are. So for the District of Lillooet, it is broken up between general government, community development services, public works and engineering, protective services, parks, trails and campgrounds, environmental health services, and recreational services, Lillooet Airport, water distribution, and sewer collection. So that ties into note 15 here, segmented information. So this just gives a breakdown of the different types of revenues and expenses and how they're allocated between the different segmented items. As mentioned before, you can see at the top. So like, for example, general government or community development. So the next few notes here, so you can see here note 16, taxation, are just giving more information as to the different types of revenue that we discussed on the face of the financial statements, broken up between taxation revenues, utility fees and user rates, the sales of services, grants and government transfers. You can see here in note 19 that there was a significant increase in the federal and provincial grants that were received in 2021 compared to 2020, which is where that large increase comes from. There's also interest and penalties revenues, donations revenues, as well as investment income for the different types of MFA and bank interest that was received. Note 23, sorry.
Sorry, before you move on, just one quick question.
Yep.
Regarding policing taxes, do we hold any liability in terms of the new collective bargaining agreement that goes back a few years? I guess it wouldn't be that significant, would it?
Sorry, say that again.
That the new collective bargaining agreement with the RCMP goes back about 6 or 7 years. There's a liability there. I would assume it's not too big. Or if at all.
No, I don't think so. No, not at all. Because the police, you're talking about for like the taxes that you collect for the police? Is that what you're asking, or sorry?
Yeah, well, all the communities, after the collective bargaining agreement was signed off, all the communities in BC, the large ones, of course, were howling because they have multi-million-dollar funds to make up.
Oh, yeah.
For past year.
So I see. So yeah, up here, it just shows the total amount that would be for policing taxes. So yeah, it's not too bad. It's $135,000 for 2021.
If I
That
could-
was then, sorry.
Sorry, Taylor, it's not really in your purview here, so
Okay.
as far as the police tax, we haven't yet received the requisition from the province to tell us how much police and school tax we're going to be required to collect this year. So I don't know what the impact is going to be on our property taxes as of yet for 2022 as a result of those retroactive pay increases for the RCMP. So there is nothing accrued as a payable because we don't owe it yet.
But we will owe it.
More than likely, the province will be requisitioning higher amounts, I would imagine. But I don't know that for sure yet. We haven't received it.
But okay, sorry for bringing it up, Tyler, but then while the topic is on there, obviously our great staff and our accounting will be very cognizant of the fact that if we are liable for the increase in salaries over the past 6 or 7 years for RCMP, it will be calculated on who is actually here rather than what number of contingent is allocated to Lillooet. So I'm sure our CFO is going to watch that carefully. Thanks. Carry on, Tyler. Sorry for confusing everybody.
Sorry. We're almost done anyways. So note 23 here, this just gives a description of the budget that's used in the financial statements and how it compares to the how the initial budget compared to the budget amounts that are listed in the income statement or the statement of operations of the financial statements. So the annual surplus here, the $4.4 million, agrees to the statement of operations. And then these are the different sort of reconciling items that make it so the budget then agrees to the $161,000 surplus that was budgeted back in April 7th, 2021. Note 25, trust funds, just talks about the cemetery perpetual care and the Lillooet Community Fund amounts that are held in trust as per the Cremation, Internment, and Funeral Services Act. Note 26. This is a note just talking about how the District of Lillooet has their different loans and long-term debt through MFA and the amount of cash deposits and demand notes that are held because of that. Since the long-term debt at the end of the year is $0 and as all the loans are paid off, In 2021, there is no cash deposit or demand notes that are held at the end of the year. Note 27, this is about the municipal pension plan. This is in every municipality financial statements. This is a note that is taken from or given to us or given to Joni from the provincial or federal government, and then the information is just put into the note regarding the amounts that Lillooet has paid and the Lillooet employees have paid during the year. And then note 30 is I guess this is the COVID Safe Restart Grant sort of schedule or note. This is a requirement ever since last year when the COVID-19 Safe Restart Grant was started. So it is a requirement that all funds and the expenses that those funds are used on need to be reported on in the financial statements until the total amount of funding has been used up. So you can see here, last year $880,000 was received, of which none was spent in 2020. And then during the year, over $200,000 was spent on software, wages, user fees, and fire protection. And that brings us to the end of the presentation. Are there any other questions?
Thank you, Tyler. Councillor Hoppel.
Okay, through the mayor, thank you, Tyler, for presenting that. I just wanted to say that, you know, the way it was laid out right at the very beginning with the explanations on where to find the figures that we were looking for and what they meant. I mean, it was very well laid out and it made it easy to follow back and forth. And I also have to say, I don't think that Lillooet has seen a financial statement like this in decades. It has been just so long since we've had a bit of money in the bank and no outstanding debt. So I really have to congratulate everybody because, like I said, it's been literally decades and I couldn't even begin to guess how many that we have had a financial statement that looked like this. So thank you again.
Thanks, Councillor Hoppel. Any other questions, comments? No. Well done, Tyler. And I concur with Councillor Hoppel, you for checking up on our staff, and it's encouraging to see that no issues with management, and we've been in good hands for the last few years with our staff and particularly our CFO. Kudos to all you guys. Thank you for taking the approach that you did with the number of items that you explained. Many of us of non-accounting people can appreciate, and I feel personally you took us through it step by step, stage by stage for a clear understanding. And I think it's a good thing for us to do, at least on an annual basis. Well done. Thank you, Terry.
Thank you for that compliment. I appreciate it. I always worry about that. So yeah, if there's nothing else, that's about all I have. So I just want to say thanks again. And yeah, here's to another great year, I guess.
See you next year.
Thank you.
Thank you, Taylor.
Someone will see you next year. Thanks, Tyler. Be well. All right. We will move to item 6.1.
It's actually a resolution that's required.
Oh, God, that's right. You're right. And I wrote a note to myself, don't forget this. I did. Could someone please move that the District of Lillooet's 2021 financial statements be accepted as presented? Councillor Leach, second Councillor Howe. Any further comments, questions? No. Call a question. All those in favor? Mr. Taylor, I'll confirm that Councillor Weed is not on the line.
That's right.
Okay, then I won't look for it. Thank you all. Now we'll move to item 6. Someone please move step number 1, the March 1, 2022 regular council meeting minutes be adopted as presented, and 2, that the March 24th, 2022 special council meeting minutes be adopted as presented. Counselor Hopple, second Counselor Howe. Any errors or omissions? Oh, any discussion? Fine, I'll call the question. All those in favor? Carried, thank you. Item 9, is there anyone that seeks to have piece of correspondence removed for discussion? Seeing none, do I have someone please move that the correspondence included in the information reported dated April 13th, 2022 be received for information? Councillor Hopple, second Councillor Leach. I'll call the question. All those in favor? Carried. Item 11.1 development variance permit DVP 22-001 for garage height at 101 Horse Beef Terrace.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. DVP 22-001 is an application to vary the height of an accessory building in the RR1S zone, 4.8 meters to 6.6 meters as measured to the highest point. The property was recently rezoned to allow for a carriage house to be constructed on the property. However, the height of another accessory structure, a garage intended to store a recreational vehicle, the height of which was not included on those plans and was not included in the rezoning. As with previous variances to height on large properties, staff continue to support them as long as they remain within the area where a single family dwelling could be constructed to an even greater height of 8.0 meters to the midpoint between the peak and the eaves with the top of a flat roof. As the property in question is 3.65 acres and there is no reasonable potential for disruption to neighboring properties and no affected individuals have expressed opposition to the request, staff are recommending that DVP 22-001 be approved. Mr. Mayor, at this time it is appropriate to ask if there are any members of the public if the other interests are affected to address council.
Thank you, Mr. Taylor. If there's any, are there any members of public that have an interest in regard to this development variance permit? Come forth, virtually or otherwise. There be none. Any questions, comments from council? Staff? No? Okay. Someone move that the development variance permit DVP 22-001 to vary the following provisions of zoning bylaw 2018 number 454 for the property located at 101 Horse Beef Terrace, legally described as lot E Plan EPP 104321, District Lot 1295, Land District 27, to increase the maximum height for an accessory residential structure in the rural residential 1 site specific zone RR1-S as prescribed in section 51.1.2 from 4.8 meters to 6.6 meters as measured to the highest point of the structure. Move. Councillor Hopple, second Councillor Leach. Any further comments or questions? Councillor Leach.
A quick one. It's not, I guess, not 100% specific to the property, but through the mayor to staff, are we in the new subdivision bylaws, are we going to be writing it in for these larger properties to be able to vary it, or is there always going to have to come to council with the DVP on?
The zoning bylaw, not
Or the zoning, yeah.
Clarify that. The zoning bylaw is a public process, so staff are in the midst of drafting our recommendations based on best practice. One of those is likely going to include, especially for these larger lots, buildable areas rather than setbacks based on building type, so that this type of structure could exist within again, the same argument that we're making. If it could have a large house there that would be even more imposing, then there doesn't seem to be much of a reason why they couldn't have an accessory building, as long as they're still within the lot coverage and their setbacks. So that's what we're going to be suggesting. And then it's going to go out to the public to see if there's any concerns with that approach. And then it will come to council with both recommendations.
Thank you.
Any further questions, comments, clarification? No? I'll call the question. All those in favor? Carried. Thank you. Staff. Item 11.2, boat launch policy revised.
Hello.
Good evening.
My apologies for not making it there in person. I was going to be, and then this afternoon I developed a sore throat. So for everyone's benefit, I'm keeping internet between us. So the boat launch policy is just a revision of the one that council looked at and adopted last year prior to the craziness of COVID. So the revisions that have been proposed in here and attached to the report simply make the COVID specific requirements optional so that they're only triggered in the event of an order from the public health officer. If there's no such order, then there are no such requirements. So this is a policy that should get us going for this season. I have met on site with, it must have been about 20 to 30 boat operators about a week ago on site at the boat launch. And they had a number of other suggestions to streamline the policy and as well fees and charges perhaps in the bylaw. So we'll be working with them over the coming months and we'll likely bring this back to council as both a revised and a refined version, which will streamline things for primarily our commercial operators who bring a lot of business to town. But if there's any questions about it, I'm happy to answer.
Any questions, comments from council? Councillor Howe?
I don't see any reasonable issues with the overall recommendation. I do, however, disagree with one thing, and that is with working into our policies and bylaws, any assumption that COVID will continue. And any measures that may be related to that, I think that we should be dealing with those as they come. It opens up opportunity for further conversation. We keep hearing, COVID's going to end, it's going to come to an end, but here we are working them into possible measures in the future if ordered by public health officers. So I would prefer that we leave that part out.
Would you like to make an amendment?
Yes, I suggest an amendment.
Okay, can I say, Mr. Taylor, that amendment as per Councillor Howe would be to withdraw any reference to COVID-19 protocols?
Well, there isn't a motion on the floor at the moment. So Councillor Howe is welcome to make that motion, not as an amendment, just as a motion put forward.
What would, which motion do we deal with? There is no motion.
There is
Yeah.
a motion on the floor, so there's nothing to amend. What Councillor Howe may wish to consider is that boat launch policy RC.02C as presented in its revised form at the April 20th, 2022 regular council meeting be adopted with the removal of any references to future COVID measures.
That works.
All
That's
right.
fine.
Is
Thank
that
you.
what you had in mind?
Yes.
Interesting, I never thought of it. And do I have a seconder?
Yeah, I'll second it and put it on the floor just to have some discussion, right?
Yeah, no, that's good.
Yeah.
Good. Because if you weren't going to second, I would.
I just like, I hadn't thought about it, so I'm like, talk
All
about
right.
it.
Okay, discussion.
So I'm just, because I'm flipping through pages. So the suggestion or the motion on the floor would be to remove section 4.3. Is in or on page 86. Where we're going with that?
You do 4.3. Yes.
Yeah, okay. Is it, I actually think that it's a very valid point, because the policy is going forward in the future. However, I'm wondering, that maybe I just don't know enough about the policy legalities, I suppose. Is it, are we able to put like a Schedule A on a policy that's good for, say, this season? Is that something that you've seen before? Is it?
Regardless of how we present it in the policy as a schedule or not, I don't think that'll make a difference to its applicability. The reasoning for it to be in here still this year is because we've had hints that there may be another wave coming from variants. And in order to provide clarity to the operators, which is why we developed this policy overall, we thought it's important that they know that should something be triggered this year because of, I don't know, what is the 10th wave or something, that they would have clarity on what the expectations were, which is the same what the expectations were last year. And then when we re-examine the whole policy again between this and next season, we'd likely, hopefully, be able to completely remove that section. It's just staff and even the operators themselves were unsure about whether or not we're going to have requirements triggered again. And so it's about clarity. It's not about presupposing anything. Just as if we bring forward another policy, should it be, I don't know, a baseball park use policy, we wouldn't actually build into it a COVID policy or COVID rules about that policy. It's just that these COVID related rules already existed in the policy that the operators are already operating from, boat operators. If council wishes to remove it, I don't see there being a problem with that. It would simply be a matter of clarity and us having to communicate with the operators kind of new that, okay, here's how we're going to have to handle this latest order from the public health officer. And no, it's not in the policy, so it's kind of a surprise.
Okay, any other comments? Councillor Hoppel.
Okay, I'm on the fence. So, through the mayor, are other communities doing this as well? Is this isolated to us because we have a boat launch, but are other communities doing this that you know of?
I know that other communities have similar boat launch policies and fees and charges and so forth, and a lot of them are a lot thicker policies than ours. This policy was developed off of other municipalities' ones. We don't do anything original in local government. So we look at what others are doing. In terms of COVID policies, I'd say they're kind of all over the map. It's really a matter of the comfort level of the community and the council as to how much they want to speak to COVID protocols in their own policies and guidelines, whether it be for staffing policies or public use policies like this. But honestly, I don't have a problem, and I don't foresee a problem if we simply strip section 4.3 out of this policy. We'll just have to deal with whatever the orders are from the public health officer at that time.
Okay, so under 4.3, it says any commercial operator wishing to use a boat launch must submit a COVID-19 safety plan to the district office, which includes the guides, contact information, blah, blah, blah. So is that just when we're in a wave of COVID, or is that for a period because it's in our it's in this bylaw that it would be every time, even if the provincial health officer says, you know what, we're at a low COVID restrictions, we don't have any, blah, blah, blah. Would we still have those requirements?
No, the addition to that section 4.3 was the first paragraph there. It says, if at any time the province enacts requirements in relation to COVID-19, we interpret that if those requirements trigger business requirements, such as we've had off and on for the last number of years, especially in the last 6 to 9 months. It's flip-flopped back and forth where the province says you need to have a COVID specific plan. Now you just need an infectious disease plan. Oh, wait, another wave, you need to have a COVID plan. Now we're back to an infectious disease plan. So it just kept flip-flopping over this last little while. So the point of this paragraph here, this conditional paragraph on 4.3 is to say, if the province orders us to do something as a business operation, and that would count for both the district and the boat operators, that would trigger having a COVID plan specifically, we would then as a district require that from the boat operators so that we know that we can speak to the public when they say, well, these 50 boat operators who are traveling through the campground where you've got hundreds of people, do they have a COVID plan? Are they meeting these requirements? Without having that written in stone in the policy, we'd have to say, no, But we hope they do because they're required to, but we don't have that enforcement ability within the policy applied by council. Best we could do is ask the operators to do that.
Okay, and alternatively, if there is, again, just for clarity, if there is no COVID and we're all good and restrictions are off, then we wouldn't be asking for this.
That's correct. It would not apply at all. As of right now, it doesn't apply.
Okay, thank you.
Okay, thank you. Counselor.
So just back to a point you just made, Mr. Denninger, in terms of enforcement. So say if the public health orders are on, there was an outbreak of COVID at the boat launch and the campground, and you had that scenario, the enforcement would look like you pulling those specific group off of the boat launch. Is that what I'm reading? But if we didn't have this, you wouldn't be able to enforce?
I wouldn't have, yeah, if we strip 4.3 out of the policy and next week an order comes from the public health officer saying that commercial operators have to meet these requirements of having a screening of guests and a COVID safety plan, we would have no ability as staff to check that. We could ask, but they could deny. Say, no, we're not going to share that with you. It's none of your business, because it's their responsibility as an operator to meet those requirements. This is an extra level of the district's engagement with the operators to ensure that we can ensure for the general public that these operators are meeting these requirements. Otherwise, we're entirely reliant upon them to be compliant with the compliance officers that may or may not be checking them. So because staff can't enforce something unless council gives us the authority through a policy decision like this to actually do that enforcement. And so we could, if an order were to come down, we could bring section 4.3 back to council at the next council meeting, maybe call a special one. But there would be a delay in that. And for that gap of time, we would be able to give zero assurance to the public that these people coming from who knows where all over the world are screened for COVID and that the operator has a COVID safety plan. We simply have to trust that they do.
Just to be clear, obviously, we as a council cannot create a resolution that goes against a public health order. Right?
Correct.
Right. So thank you for bringing this up because I completely missed me. And I'm glad you did bring it up because from my perspective, then why the heck are we doing the reverse and creating an opportunity to enhance what public health is doing? And what's happened in the past is that the public health officials are the ones that have to assure that this happens. Plus, as you say, if heaven forbid COVID mandates and the like come back, then we can address it. But I'm with Councillor Howe on this. I don't want to do any extra work that puts our staff into a busy situation for public health. So I'm with that one. We've got that one resolution on the floor. We've got to vote on it. Either it stands or it doesn't. But I'm in favor of no resolution for anything for public health because they supersede anything that we can do in our community. So we've got other things that are important that our staff has to deal with, and public health can make sure that people around are looking after meeting the protocols that they come out. And we won't stand in the way and we'll assist. So that's my feeling on it. Okay, any more comments? Mr. Taylor, would you mind rereading the
that boat launch policy RC.02C as presented in its revised form at the April 20th, 2022 regular council meeting be adopted with the removal of any references to future COVID measures.
and that's moved by Councillor Howe. You okay, Councillor Leach, for seconding?
The motion has been seconded.
Yeah.
Yeah, okay. Any further discussion? Oh, sorry.
That's okay.
I just double checked. Any further discussions? Call the question. All those in favor? Those opposed? That's defeated.
Motion fails.
Okay, motion is defeated. Now, we'll move on. That boat launch policy RC dash 0.02C as presented in its revised form at the April 2022 regular council meeting be adopted. Any further discussion? Who's gonna move it? Sorry, Councillor Howe, second Councillor Hoffel. Now is there any further discussion? Councillor Howe,
And we're talking about the 2022 bylaw, election bylaw.
the one that staff recommends.
Yes, thank you. So I have a question of staff, please. Through the mayor.
Wait,
All right, we're still on the vote launch.
Oh, we are, okay, sorry, I thought we were complete that.
So the motion that was put on the floor originally by Councilor was defeated.
Yeah.
So now the motion on the floor, moved by Councilor Howe and seconded by Councilor Hoffel, is for the staff recommendation on item 11.2.
Okay, any further discussions? All those in favor? Those opposed? It's defeated. Okay, we'll move on to item 12.1, 2022 tax rate bylaw.
If I may. So what's just happened here is we've defeated an amendment to a policy and then we've defeated another amendment to the policy, which means the policy still in effect has all the COVID requirements still in effect. Meaning we are going to require a COVID plan and screening of all operators of the boat launch, regardless of public health orders.
Then why did we bring it forward and waste our time here tonight? Huh? Please, help me.
So unfortunately, yeah, so just so council knows, and until this comes back, we have been unable to remove optional requirements. So I just want you to be aware that the boat operators may be concerned about this, why they need to provide a COVID-19 safety plan when the province doesn't require it.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. We are recording.
Thank you, Mr. Taylor. We are in recording. So council, let's try this again. Mr. Taylor, if you could give me the guidance that the mayor has the ability to do at the meeting regarding the resolution that was defeated.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Section 131 of the community charter, without limiting the authority of the council to reconsider a matter, the mayor may require the council to consider and vote again on a matter that was subject of a vote. As restrictions on the authority under subsection 1, the mayor may only initiate a reconsideration under this section at the same meeting at which the vote took place.
Thank you, Mr. Taylor. Therefore, we're going to reconsider the staff recommendation that boat launch policy RC.02C as presented in its revised form at the April 2022 regular council meeting be adopted. Who will move? Councillor Hoffel, second, Councillor Howe. We will have discussion. Now that I know that if we don't pass this, then we end up with a greater restrictive policy. So that's from my perspective, and I'm concerned about that. If anything, I don't want any more restrictive. I want something less restrictive. Obviously, from my perspective, I like the idea Councillor Howe brought up. I don't want any relation to protocol of public health or COVID. However, we're in a situation now, we should do what's best for our community and the people, and we can move on from it. That's my take. Councillor Leach, go ahead.
So from my perspective, to the section, although I do agree with what both of you are saying, it's just, I look at it as a tool in the toolbox for staff, if something were to happen. And, you know, I know there's a massive, I don't know, mass is right, the right word, but there is an active COVID outbreak in the community right now, right? And personal feelings aside, to me, it's just a tool. All I'm looking at this in this policy.
Thank you. Any other comment? Councillor Hoffel?
And from my perspective, I look at it as the happy medium. We don't have the huge restrictions. We don't have no restrictions, but we have the ability to put restrictions in place when they are needed. And that's good enough for me. Thank you.
Okay. Any further comments? Councillor Howell?
Companies and businesses are already so very restricted. I strongly believe we shouldn't be putting more pressure on them. It's not our role. If anything, we should be helping them. They have gone through 2 years of trials and tribulations due to COVID, and they've felt the repercussions of the existing policies. Mayor Bussey, when you spoke to letting public health make those decisions and enforce those decisions, I think that holds merit, because it draws sort of a line in the sand in terms of if that's what those are the decisions we make, those are the responsibilities they have now, instead of placing that on staff of the district. I would like to, I really don't think we should. I think it's gonna affect, I don't think we should be placing this policy. It's not our role. And I think it's going to have its effects once again. So I'm of the same mindset. I don't want to see this in our policy.
So I can say that under the community charter, I have the option to bring back one at the meeting. That's it. I can't and I won't bring back your particular resolution. For the sake of doing business and getting on with things, we're going to deal with it. Mr. Taylor, you have something to say before I call the vote?
I have a suggestion for a compromise, if you're amenable. What it would require is actually an amendment this time to the item that's on the table. Adopting this bylaw in its current form so that we can allow the operators to get on with their business with an and that tacked on to the end of this. And that staff return with this policy for further discussion at the next council meeting. That way, we are not requiring at the beginning of the voting season that they meet with COVID restrictions that no longer exist. Staff can do a little more research, bring it back for further debate. But I would need a councillor to suggest that as an amendment. It would have to be seconded. That amendment would have to be voted on to whether include it. And then you would have to vote again on the resolution as a whole. I know it seems a little convoluted, but that's the appropriate process.
Thank you for your advice, Councilor Leach.
I would like to put that motion on the table to add that staff come back with this policy. Or it's to accept it as it is, and that's with the end that if.
Okay.
Got it.
Second.
Whatever. Words. Okay.
You just point your hand
He
to Mr.
says.
Taylor and say, as Mr. Taylor advised. Second, who's second?
I'll second it.
Councillor Hoffel. Any further discussion? That's a good compromise in my eyes. I appreciate that. Okay,
Now, just to make sure that we're following the proper process, we are, this next vote is to accept the amendment.
and that amendment.
Yes, and then we'll have to vote one more time.
We will. Okay. All right, I don't hear anything. Call the question. All those in favor? Those opposed? Okay, carried. Now we'll deal with 11.2. That the boat launch policy RC, I'm tired of reading this, 0.02, I could see as presented in its revised form at the April 2022 regular council meeting be adopted. Discussion? Oh,
And that staff be directed to.
no, we voted on that.
That was voting to accept the amendments. Now you have to vote on the entire resolution, including the amendment portion.
I'm getting schooled. Thank you very much. Okay, and that Mr. Taylor just alluded to. Good?
We good.
Who moves?
And sorry, that was already on the floor, so that was moved by Councilor Hoffel and seconded by Councilor Hunt.
Right, any discussion? I'll call the question. All those in favor? Oh, sorry. I'm opposed. Okay.
No, you're not. You can't be opposed. We're giving it a month. You voted, I saw your hand.
We voted on the and that prior to this one. Lead me again by the hand, Mr. Taylor, please.
Resolution is put on the table. A counselor made a motion to amend the resolution.
Right.
That's tacking on a separate bit. You were voting on whether to accept tacking on that second
Okay.
bit. That motion passed. Now you take this whole amended motion and you're voting on it together.
Okay.
If that's,
Now I understand.
if the amendment had not been approved by council, it would have gone away and you would just be voting on the original motion on the table.
Gonna have to send me back to school. You got me to the point I'd like to close that whole launch completely.
That would be another amendment.
See, I'm digging myself a deeper hole. Thank you, council. Bear with me once more, and we'll do this right. Okay. Somebody moved that the boat launch, well, we've already moved that. So, right? It's
The
moved
entire
and seconded.
resolution has been moved by Councilor Hoffel and seconded by Councilor
All right.
Howell.
Any further questions or discussions? Now I will call the vote. All those in favor? All those opposed? Carried. Are we finished with 11.2?
It'll be back in 13 days.
Thank you very much. Okay, folks, thank you for your patience. Apologies for all the confusion, but it's a learning lesson. We'll move to item 12.1, 2022 tax rate bylaw.
Yes, thank you, Mr. Mayor. I'm just bringing up on the screen. I'm going to try and lighten the mood a little bit with some fancy colors and graphs, and hopefully it's a little easier than Jeremy's there. All right, so hopefully, can everybody see that?
Yes, we can.
Thank you. So just to start, I'll give you a quick overview of the municipal taxes for both this proposed bylaw this year as well as the previous 4 years. If you recall, as part of the financial plan bylaw, council approved an increase of 3.5% in municipal property taxes over the revenue that we collected in 2021. It's important for council to remember that the district is also required to charge for, collect, and remit taxes to other authorities, including the school and police tax that we talked about earlier, the hospital district, the regional district, BC Assessment, and the Municipal Finance Authority. We can only control the amount of municipal property tax that we charge. We have no control over the amounts that we're required to charge for these other authorities, and they typically make up about 50% of the total taxes that property owners see on their annual property tax bill. So quickly, the historical tax rates for each class of property for the District of Lillooet. Tax rates, as you probably know, are expressed as dollars per thousand. So for example, in the tax rate bylaw for consideration tonight, a residential property, if it was assessed at $200,000, and I'm just throwing that number out there because it's easy peasy, they would pay $3.084 per $1,000 of assessed value, or $600 and just under $610. A business class property, on the other hand, would pay $13.68498 dollars per thousand, or $2,700 in property taxes, which is about 4 times as much as the residential class properties. So again, as part of the financial plan bylaw, council approved a 3.5% increase in property tax revenue. I've calculated the tax rates in this property tax rate bylaw so that each class of property, except the utility class, because they're an animal amongst themselves, will see the same percentage increase in municipal tax charges. Not to say that each property will see exactly 3.5% increase in their taxes. It depends on, of course, their assessed value and how that change this year compares with other properties of the same class. Some properties will see an increase of more than 3.5%, some less than 3.5%, and some may actually even see a decrease. Of course, the bylaw that I've presented to council is not the only option. Council can choose to allocate the total property tax revenue differently amongst the classes, but the same dollar value must be collected, as that's the amount that was adopted as part of the financial plan bylaw. So it's important to remember that if council were to request that a certain class of property see less of an impact in the municipal property taxes, the reduction has to be made up by the other classes. So using this 3.5% increase in property taxes across all classes, the impact to an average single family residence would be an increase of approximately $42 for the year. A class 6, which is business and other, would see an increase of approximately $123 in municipal property tax. Again, this is based on the average assessed value in these property class types. So some may see a greater increase, some may see a smaller increase, some may actually see a decrease. Here you can see that class 1, which is residential, contributes the largest proportion of municipal property tax revenue. This is followed by class 6, again, the business or other class, and then utilities, which is the class 2 properties. You may remember, you may not, the tax rate for utility class properties is limited by the tax rate for business class. So reducing the tax rate or the tax burden for business class properties directly reduces the tax rate and therefore the revenue from the utility class properties. In turn, as I mentioned before, that reduced revenue has to be made up from somewhere else. Typically, the greatest impact is seen by residential properties because they pay the greatest proportion of our property taxes. And hopefully that was short and sweet. If you have any questions, happy to answer them.
Thank you, Ms. LaRue. Nicely done. Any questions, comments from council? No. There be none. Someone please move that tax rates and municipal tax collection bylaw number 2022-009 be introduced and read a first, second, and third time. Councillor Leach, second. Councillor Howe. Any further discussions? I'll call the question. All those in favor? Thank you, staff. Thank you, Ms. LaRue. Move to item 12.2, 2022 election bylaw.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. So deadlines for the 2022 general local election are upon us, and the first deadline that we must meet is review and adoption of the election bylaw. Election bylaws are needed to establish certain procedures and to delegate authority for certain actions to the chief election officer. These bylaws also apply to by-elections and assent voting opportunities or referendum that are not conducted as part of the general local election. Election bylaws must be adopted at least 56 days before the nomination period for a general local election, which is July 4th of this year, with the last regular council meeting before that deadline being June 7th. The Local Government Act lays out most of the procedures for advanced voting, but it does give local governments some discretion for a number of items that I will outline. For the most part, staff are recommending that the district adhere to the default provisions of the Local Government Act, but have outlined the additional options in the staff report. To start, advanced voting must be held on the 10th day before general voting day, which is October 5th. The Local Government Act requires a second opportunity, except in cases where a municipality has a population of 5,000 or less. By bylaw, we can waive the requirement for the additional advanced voting. We are recommending that the district avail itself of this. This has been standard practice in Lillooet in previous elections. There are other accessible ways to vote if a resident is unable to attend either the advanced or general voting opportunities, and we'll get into those in more detail later. The district has 3 options for voter registration: using the provincial voters list, our own register, or same-day voter registration. Staff continues to support the same-day voter registration as the provincial voting boundaries do not line up with the district's boundaries and can lead to accidentally allowing electoral area residents to vote in the district's election. There are also options for accepting of nominations, and staff again recommend the default being a nomination must be made by at least 2 nominators, no requirement for a nomination deposit, nomination documents viewable upon request, and the names of the ballots will appear alphabetically by names on the ballots rather will appear alphabetically by last name. Some of the additional options available to council are requiring up to 10 nominators instead of the 2, requiring a nomination deposit up to $100, which is returned when the financial statements are filed with Elections BC. Provide other methods for viewing of nomination documents, including posting online, and determining the order of names on the ballots by lot rather than alphabetically. In terms of voting opportunities, the bylaw, the default in the bylaw is to delegate the election officer to establish the dates, locations, and hours of voting opportunities within the limits of the Local Government Act. Council may set this by bylaw, but it does not leave a lot of wiggle room to pivot if there are extenuating circumstances that don't allow for a voting place to be used in a particular year. This provision does not allow the chief election officer to arbitrarily change dates of the 2 voting opportunities. They are established by legislation. And in the case of Lillooet, this delegation would only affect special voting opportunities, such as the dates and times of attending the hospital and any care facilities for those people who are physically unable to attend a voting opportunity. The default for scrutineers is 1 scrutineer for each candidate per ballot box in use, and 2 scrutineers each for and against the question of the referendum. Any more than that can be disruptive to the staff attempting to undertake the hand count. So there are 5 ballot boxes. If there are 10 candidates, this is a potential for there to be up to 50 scrutineers in the room while the count is being undertaken. However, if council should wish to allow for more, this is permitted by legislation. Also, in the unlikely but possible event of a tie, the default provision is to resolve the tie by the drawing of a lot in accordance with Section 151 of the Local Government Act. The alternative is to require a runoff election. However, these must be conducted in the same manner as a general local election, including all of the associated costs. Finally, the most significant change in 2022 election is that mail ballot voting, if offered, is available for anyone to request. Whereas before it was limited to those who would not be in the district for the advanced voting opportunity or general voting day, or for those who physically could not attend a location and did not have access to a special voting opportunity. Staff are recommending to continue to offer mail voting, not just in relation to the ongoing pandemic, but also as an already established way of offering more accessible opportunities for voter engagement. Council is not, however, required to offer mail ballot voting. The mail ballot voting is also proposed to be integrated directly into the election bylaw, rather than having 2 separate bylaws as they are currently drafted. With the exception of the mail ballot voting, staff are not proposing any changes from the previous ways that elections have been run in the district. Staff are recommending that election and assent voting bylaw number 2022-010 be read a first, second, and third time as presented. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Taylor. Any questions, comments, or clarity? Councillor Hoppel.
Okay, through the mayor, I'm just a little fuzzy on the mail ballot voting option. So we do currently allow mail ballot voting, but this is a new addition, the biggest change in 2022 election is mail ballot voting, but we already had some cases where people could do that, correct?
The change, sorry, and if it wasn't clear, is that we can now no longer limit it to people who are going to be out of the district or who physically cannot attend the voting place. It is open to everyone, and that is by legislation. So before we could offer mail ballot voting, but put restrictions on it, and only certain people could request a mail ballot. If we offer mail ballot voting, it must be open to anyone who wants to request a mail ballot.
So and how would we know, like, they don't have to, when I go in to vote, I have to produce my ID or my voter's card, or how do we know?
When we give out a mail ballot, the chief election officer is required to keep a registry of those who have requested the mail ballot, so that, and that will be distributed to all of the poll workers to make sure that whoever is showing up has not already received a ballot.
But that's still not to say that anybody couldn't vote that or fill that out.
Yeah, and that's true. The same could be said as people could come in and vote and try and go back in line again.
Right.
And if it's missed, they could vote again. That doesn't happen very often. Most people do understand that voting once means voting once.
Right.
We do have methods through the registry to catch people who attempt to double vote. They are checked off both in the voter book at the table, as well as registered in the registry of mail ballots if they get one that way.
So I'm kind of concerned about places like Sumac, Red Rock, Mountain View Lodge, because I know that not the scrutineers, but they will come in and they will talk to each person and see if they're cognizant enough to make that vote. I just want to make sure that they're not, in any way influenced or,
And for.
so people will still be going out to these places and
We
doing
will still
that.
be attending some special voting opportunities, such as at the hospital.
Okay, right.
Where the
Yeah.
deputy chief election officer and myself will be there and explaining the process, handing the ballot. Now, whether there's a family member there who may be
Mhm.
interacting with the individual
Sure.
is not necessarily something that we can control. But we will be offering those special voting opportunities so that they don't have to come in, sign the form, allowing someone else to retrieve a ballot for them.
Okay.
And we will go there.
Okay,
and-
fair enough.
and give
Yeah.
them the opportunity and out to the location.
So you support this?
Yes.
Okay.
The option is not allowing mail ballot voting at all.
Right.
Which robs people who may be away of
Absolutely.
that right.
Yeah, okay. I just wanted to clarify the ID and that kind of thing.
But as a follow-up, then, mail-in ballots will be rigorously checked by yourself,
Yes.
the elections officer.
When a mail ballot is requested, the name, contact information is recorded. We know exactly how many ballots go out. We account for any ballots that we don't receive back. And they go out in personalized envelopes with secrecy envelopes and numbered secure envelopes inside of that.
Great. Thank you. Any other comments, questions? Counselor Howe?
First, I just want to make a comment. I think it's very interesting that it was passed by legislation that we now have to lump this in. It's not just for specific segments. And I just find that very interesting. Aside from that, I have a question regarding the nominations. Through the mayor to staff, Mr. Taylor, can you just elaborate on what nominations, like what does that actually mean? So how does it work? How does a nomination work? Like I could nominate somebody up to 10 people. Do I have to form hypothetically, would I form organization that would then make a nomination? How does that?
It's not nominating someone who just on your own volition.
Mhm.
Anyone who wishes to put their name forward for either a mayor or a councillor seat will pick up a nomination package, which we will provide in the month before the nomination period opens. What it is the responsibility of the individual seeking the nomination to get the nominations of those two residents. So they take the form, the residents sign it saying that I nominate this person, and then the applicant will bring back the form to us. We cannot accept it unless it has the required number of nominators, but it's not someone just choosing to nominate someone. The onus is on this person seeking the seat.
Okay, I see. Thank you.
Councillor Lee.
Yeah. One thing that is not in here is under the Elections Act. Somebody can run for office who doesn't necessarily live with the district if they are nominated. Is that not correct? There's a clause in there somewhere. I'm wondering if that should be added for clarity.
The draft bylaw that was done up by the fleet of lawyers who are far more intelligent than I am have suggested all the clauses that have been presented to council. I would need to go and do some additional research on that.
Okay, no, that's fine. I know it was just something that came off my desk, so I just thought.
It did not come up as one of the items that was of council discretion. Those are all the items that staff have included in this bylaw. Everything else would rely on the local government and
Okay.
So one more question to that note then, through the mayor.
Councillor Howell.
Thank you. Through the mayor. So as I understand, when we last ran, there was I'm going to call it a stipulation, although I doubt that's the correct word for it, that anybody, like if you were to live in Vancouver, you could also run for council or mayor locally here. Or do you have to, like, you'd already have to have been elected, and then if you were to move away, you could still hold your seat. Do you remember how that worked?
See the lawyers.
Yeah.
Leave him, he's on the hot seat, he's going to watch.
So I don't believe you have to live in the district. You have to live in the province for at least 6 months, which was April 14th of this year. I will double check to see if anything has changed since the last election. But I do not believe that residency in the municipality is a requirement, rather residency in the province is generally what is spoken to. But of course, as I get further into this process of my first election, I will be getting more and more familiar with the nomination requirements as we get closer to the August nomination period.
Okay,
Thank you.
Councillor Leach.
Just to add to that, I think it's coming down the line. There's some discussion of that at LGLA, and I do believe there's some conditions coming, or if not, if they're already put into this upcoming election time.
It hadn't been brought up in any of our election update sessions, but I will pose that question to the group.
Thank you, council. Could someone move the election and assent voting bylaw number 2022-010 be introduced and read a first, second, and third time? Moves Councillor Hoppel, second Councillor Leach. Any further discussion? Call the question. All those in favor? Carry. Thank you, Mr. Taylor. Item 12.3, strengthening community service program 2022 intake.
Thank you, council. This is the second round and final round, I believe, of the Strengthening Community Services Program. Council did review a similar request last year. It was during the throes of COVID, and the funding through that program was not entirely exhausted. So they've introduced the second intake with the remaining monies. So it's not the same amount of grant funding from last time, but there is still some left. So what we're proposing as staff to council, if you support it, is to work in partnership with the Lillooet Friendship Center Society to continue the operations that they were able to do under the large grant funding last year. They'll be able to extend those services until July 31st, 2023, if they get the full ask that they're going for, which much like last time, thanks to a suggestion from our mayor, was to look at it not as a municipality of Lillooet only service, but as a regional service that encompasses all our neighboring communities. So their ask is for $112,000 from this program. And if council supports this, we will work with our grant writer and the LCFS to put in that application and hopefully get them to continue offering sheltering services and related addictions, mental health, and so forth, those services related to the shelter. And as we know, during some of the crises recently, that shelter serves anyone, whether they're caught in a highway that's been cut off because of weather events or anything else. So it is a community asset to have that, and staff are recommending the council support this grant application.
Thank you, Mr. Any comment? Oh, sorry, you're not finished?
That's all. Thank you.
Okay. Any questions, comments from council? Councilor Howell?
Through the mayor to Mr. Denegar. So I do have a few questions. When you mention it would be this grant would be all encompassing for the region, all communities in the region, what communities, what would that entail?
I believe the boundaries, it was based on what the Friendship Center Society saw as the people who were utilizing their services. And it went, I believe, as far as like Ashcroft and a lot of the First Nations around us, those First Nations communities, where there may be transients, people with mental health or drug addiction issues who already use Lillooet as the hub of the area. Where Lillooet, because of the Friendship Center Society and the Community Cares Program, they are the only real resource that has this breadth of support services in the area. So they added up the numbers for all the areas where they had already existing clients. And that amounted to, I believe, just under 10,000 people. And that matches with whether we're looking at people in the area who might come here to get the tires changed on their car or do grocery shopping or whatnot. It's sort of the catchment area for Lillooet. So it's not looking to extend beyond what is already our natural catchment area. It's just recognizing that Lillooet and services, in this case, the shelter, already serves more than simply residents within the municipal boundaries. And so in the last grant application, that was an argument that was very successful and got them significantly more funding than if we'd taken the narrow view.
Follow-up question. So the previous grant that they applied for and when included the existing, this natural catchment area that we're speaking to right now?
Correct.
Will it be advertised?
No, it's not advertised. And in fact, in recent conversations with Carol at the Friendship Center, they've made a point of telling people who are inquiring about the services here that no, this is not for people not from this area. Apparently word has got out that we have fantastic services through the Friendship Center Society, and the society has been pushing back really hard because they were already at capacity with what they could provide for this natural catchment area. We don't want people, we're not going to encourage people to cross over the mountains from Kamloops or Whistler or Pemberton to come here for the exceptional services we have. We simply don't have the capacity. And then under this new, under the second grant intake, there's a lot less money than there was last round. So the actual level of services they're able to provide is probably going to be more restricted than it already was.
One final question for me. Why is there a decrease in the money offered this round?
Yeah, it was intended to be a one-time grant, and they were expecting, the federal government working through the provinces expected that it would be a one-time handout of all the funds and that it'd all be used up. But there weren't as many applicants or as large applicants as they expected. So this is just the money remaining from that first round that they've decided to allocate it proportionally to any applicants.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you. Any further questions, comments, council? Okay. Someone please move that the application to Union of BC Municipalities Strengthening Community Services Program 2022 intake for the Community Cares Homeless Shelter Project be supported, and that the District of Lillooet will provide overall grant management. Councillor also, second Councillor Howe. Further discussion? Okay, I'll call the question. All those in favor? Carried, and thank you. Thank you, Mr. Deniger. Okay, we'll move on to work in progress update. Council's had a chance to look at it. Any comments, questions, queries? Okay, being done. Someone please move that the work in progress as of April 13th, 2022 be received for information. Councillor Leach, second Councillor Hoffman. Call the question. All those in favor? Carried, and thank you. Okay, we'll move to Mayor's report. March 3rd, had a regular teams meeting with Minister Osborne and Minister Barr with the Southern Regional Districts and Mayors. Discussion with Minister Barr regarding funding from province and federal for connectivity, high-speed internet and cellular, something that we alluded to with Shaw and Rogers. Again, from my perspective, I want to start pushing the cellular part of it again. And thanks for bringing up Highway 40, hiding 99 south and 12. Come on, there's going to be enough traffic from tourism through the summer and even in the winter. When you look at it now, they'll get their money back, and the tourists will use it even more than the commercial operators will. So anyway, enough for that. March 17th, I had Interior Health, Public Health, Zoom meeting of mayors and regional chairs for the vaccine roundtable. March 23rd, a meeting with outgoing and incoming manager of clinical operations for Lillooet, Lytton, Heidi Schilling, Jeff Harrison, and the CAO. March 28th, at a meeting with Chief Edwards and discussions on mutual project benefits. April 8th, Minister Osborne and Minister Cullen by teams with mayors and regional chairs for Southern Regional Districts and the island, and the review of provincial budget and funding sources, where Minister Osborne stepped down and Minister Cullen took over from him. And these meetings are going to continue on a monthly basis, which are very good. It's good to get read what the other districts and the other towns or mayors are expressing their concerns are. April 15th, had telephonic discussions with Councillor Susan James of Weston. That's it for me. Councillor Buffalo.
Okay, March 17th, I attended the NEDIC meeting. Kim North did a delegation for the hub. Lots going on there, including e-bike rentals and tours. Lillooet Agriculture and Food Society will be working on a cookbook that will include Lillooet homegrown food in the recipes. So I'm really looking forward to that. There's lots going on around town these days. I learned that the stock car races are back. Congrats to the volunteers for putting that back together. I also heard that Lillooet has cooking classes and class 1 driver's license classes, which I was shocked at. But yeah, they're being held at the Elks Hall, so I was very impressed. March 25th was Seniors Fair Day at the Rec Center, where Patty LaPlaca and I had a table for BC Housing. We handed out a lot of information about the SAFER program, in which the government gives a small kickback for seniors that pay rent but are not subsidized by the government. We also gave out applications for McLean Manor, Red Rock Manor, and Sumac Suites, explaining the differences between the three along with pricing. So that was really informative to the seniors. They were happy to have the explanations defining each of those facilities. I was going to share the petition about better forest management in BC that I wrote, but I'm going to wait until after I present it as a resolution at SILGA, and then I'll do a report to share with everybody at the next council meeting. March 31st was Community Cares Day in Downton Park. Music, chili, bannock, drumming. It was really nice. Thank you to our Friendship Center for all they do. Since Russia started its war on Ukraine, February 24th of this year, I was inspired to make flag pins to share with anybody that wanted to wear one. I've handed out about 300 and I'm still in production. I decided to share this as I needed to thank Lillooet Hospital for the use of their laminator machine, and to Jasmine Kelly and Jackie Bisdell for using their breaks and lunch hour to print and cut. I also need to thank Patty Flan. She was at my house one night when I was in production, and she started helping me make these flags. And then a couple of weeks ago, a student at Lillooet Secondary was wearing one of my flags, and Patty saw her and started talking about the production of these flags. And now I'm happy to say that Lillooet Secondary School has gone into production as well. The purpose of this flag is, when you see it or wear it, please take a minute to be grateful we live in Canada and to think about the people of Ukraine. A donation can be anything from a prayer and onward. We're attending SILGA next week, so I contacted them for permission to put some of the flags out there, and they went farther. They will be taking donations for the flags that I supply and asked me to bring 175. So that's what I'm doing this weekend. So big thanks to everyone for their support. April 6th to the 8th, I attended the Local Government Leadership Academy Conference in Richmond, rescheduled from February. Bonnie Henry was the keynote speaker. She was lovely. She spoke of her trials and tribulations over the last few years, and when asked what her most challenging time had been over the last couple of years, she said it was her decision to move the second vaccination from 4 weeks to 16 weeks. She did her scientific research, she did her medical research, she laid in bed at night questioning her decision to keep the residents of BC safe despite backlash from many sources, including the companies that have manufactured the vaccine. Fast forward 6 months later, when the research came back proving that the 16-week pause between the vaccinations was indeed a far better choice. It was a victory for her. She spoke of the highs and the lows, how children wrote her and thanked her, and how the haters wrote her with cruel words. Her neighbor is an anti-vaxxer, an anti-masker, etc. But when they see each other, there's respect between them, because in the end, they are still neighbors. She was very inspiring, to say the least. The Local Government Leadership Academy Conference is my personal favorite because it's about learning, and it also centers around sharing information between communities. I met the mayor of Sechelt, Darnelda Seegers. We were discussing infrastructure, and she told me that Sechelt had received $18 million so far this past year in grants from the provincial government, and I was astounded. So I pressed on. She said that they had many shelf-ready projects. In Lillooet, I know we're close to having our asset management completed, and as soon as that is done, I would like to discuss having a few shelf-ready projects so that Lillooet can apply for those grants to start replacing our infrastructure, including Russell Street. And I think we should do this before our provincial government changes hands as well. On the last day of LGLA, Darnelda gave me her card and whispered the provincial government called them, and Sechelt just got another grant for roads and pipes that was allocated to Abbotsford. But due to the flooding in Abbotsford, that recovery money came out of a different pot. So Sechelt was giving the money again for a shelf-ready project. It's making connections like these that are important to me, and they give me ideas on what is working in other communities. I will keep in touch with Darnelda so that perhaps next time the government calls her, she might say, oh, we don't have any projects, but I know Lillooet. Mike, here's a number, give them a call. That's hoping, right? So there's lots more that I'd like to tell you, but I'll leave the rest. I was going to leave it to Councillor Weep, who, silent as she is, will be just a Councillor Leach.
Thanks, Councillor Hall. Councillor Hall?
Well, I did not attend that, so it's been a fairly quiet month, but I would like to let council know, in case you guys are unaware, tomorrow is the AGM for the Chamber of Commerce. There's 6, and so right now 36 attendees booked. But we know we have way more businesses in town than that, so if we could help enroll, that would be wonderful. Thank you.
That's it. Thanks, Councillor Hall. Councillor Leach?
Okay, so I will see you there. I think there's two to go. That's perfect. I actually, my notes about LGLA with so much Councillor Hopples that I was just gonna let Barb speak to it because she's always got it up so really good. So it was a great conference. It was really nice to make those connections and to be able to communicate with people face to face, especially those that I've been speaking with on Zoom for 2 years. So it was really good. I do have a long list, so I'm not going to speak to it. But if anybody wants to chat about LGLA, call me. One thing I wanted to just bring to light, since we had discussions on it, is the replacing the street lights. The street got done, and what a difference. So I'm really, really happy about that, including the constant flickering of the light outside my house at night. It's been resolved after 6 years. It's great. So awesome. Oh gosh, where to start? March 29th, I attended the regularly scheduled NDIT Caribou Chilcotin Rec Committee for the third intake of funding applications. The East Lillooet Memorial Garden. So I believe the folks are up here this week for the final work bee before the grand reopening on May 7th. And I just got word today that Transportation Minister, Police Transportation Minister Rob Fleming will be coming up as well for the opening, as it also falls under Modi. And then Sally Watson, who is a board director on the NDIT REC, or NDIT board, the whole board, she will be representing them and be coming down as well. Speak to this one first. Okay. So as far as the local government policing modernization roundtable, I got a note that we are going to commence shortly. They actually wanted a series of meetings next week, and that is when Silga is. So I'm hoping that the APCM contact is trying to redo some of the meeting dates because I think there's a few folks that are affected. That being said, the province has told them that they are on schedule to release the special committee's report on reforming the Police Act, which is something that we'll be reviewing and commenting on as far as I'm aware. And we are, as most of you know, currently up against Hewlett for the semifinals of CBC's BC Small Town. Please go and vote. We have until 10 p.m. tonight. That being said, the municipal affairs reporter from CBC, who did not think that we would make it past Merritt, never mind Salt Spring Island, they had to come back to Lillooet to film more footage for the bit that is supposed to air tonight on CBC News. So I toured him around last Friday morning. And yeah, that was kind of interesting to sit with somebody who really didn't know. Put it this way, he was very excited for our 3 other top competitors. So it was a bit of a difficult interview for me, I'm not gonna lie. But I hope that I did Lillooet justice. It was definitely not an easy one for me.
Well, the wind is completely on your shoulder.
I'm trying, I've been working. That being said, in the grand scheme of things, there was 128 communities in the whole competition, and to make top 4, that's pretty awesome. So go Lillooet. I had a SWIMS meeting last night, and I'm really happy to report that Dave Rempel who has a lot of experience in the swimming world and is also an educator here locally. He's actually joined the board as a director, and he has brought a lot more insight to the directors to make a lot of decisions. And he actually reported, so he's actually running a class through the high school right now to get students swimming and pique their interest to start taking Bronze Cross and then further on for their NL license. And he reported yesterday that he did a practice endurance test with his class. So first of all, note that out of all of his classes, they have to meet here at the rec center on their own time and be on time for it. And it's his most well-attended class he's taught at the high school. And that during the endurance test, there are 8 to 9 students that are well on their way who will be able to pass the Bronze Cross. I think that's your basic lifeguarding certification. And there's at least 2 senior students who could possibly pass the NL certification. So, he was explaining that if those students were to get their certification and they've done their core studies during school time, it might be an opportunity for the district to employ them as lifeguards during the day when they're not in class. So it's just some future planning that he's brought to light that we're going to discuss here in a little bit. And then Kate Alec did a report on the Community Cares program that so the Friendship Center got a $10,000 grant to run basically a physio therapy session or sessions over a course of time in the water. And they just ended up getting more applicants, up to 15 people already using this program. And then she keeps getting phone calls to add people. So they're almost at their funding limit, but there is probably spots for a few more still. And I think that's all I have for now. I'll leave it at that.
Thanks, Councillor Leach. The individual board member on SWIMS, the teacher?
He is, he's actually the vice principal, I believe.
I'm really buoyed to hear that. It's engaging a segment of our population, being obviously the students. And that can create not only benefit for them socially, but for our infrastructure utilization. And Councillor Howe, that's the kind of thing I'd like to see see what a single individual can do inside that institution. We need that kind of emphasis by people in that institution, especially from the opioid crisis and that kind of thing. If we could find, I'm really buoyed to hear you say that, we can find someone inside the school to follow the same path along that line, we can win. I'm really happy to hear that.
Just to add, like he's doing the classes that he's running, like he's doing extra work outside of his work time to get them prepared. He's also putting together curriculum for the equivalent of what Red Cross swimming lessons would be. He's looking at getting his NL recertified so he can actually help out with our lifeguarding situation. So there's a lot that he's bringing to the table alone, and we've had discussions about why we do this, and it's for the future of the community. He's really passionate about that. I have to commend him because he's so gung ho and
kudos.
And every step he's getting there. So
great.
Yeah.
Let's find another that'll follow the path. Excellent. So happy to hear that. Thank you, councillors. Okay. CAO report, Mr. Dennegar.
Thank you. I've got 5 items here. The first and most important one is you'll see my seat has been occupied by our new manager of Public Works and Utilities, Brandy Galeasso. She's worked with the district for a little over 6 years, and she has tried twice to become our head of our department, Public Works. I'm very excited to have her on this role. So she will be working with our contractor, Don Darling, who will continue doing capital projects. And his title's changed to Interim Director of Public Works. Ms. Galeazzo will be focusing on operations over the next year and working closely with Don Darling and the rest of the senior management team to prepare for the eventual taking on the role of director. All goes well, and I have no doubt it will. So that's the first thing, and these rest four are not nearly as exciting or interesting, but I think you should still know them. So the water source assessment is underway. It's looking at the water sources, Seton and all the creeks around us and the wells and so forth. So that assessment's underway. We anticipate having a draft report by mid-June. It will be shared first with council and key stakeholders in the community who hold knowledge related to these water sources. It'll be followed by a public engagement meeting. And then we will finalize from that feedback a report that we'll bring to council later this year. As well related to water, the water treatment plant, we are doing an assessment of options for improving the Seton River intake to address the turbidity issues. The amount of silt that gets drawn into our water treatment plant is causing considerable ongoing wear and tear to the pipes, valves, and filters of the plant, which of course increases our operating costs and threatens the quality of our water. So we are looking at ways of doing passive filtering based on recommendations from people who've been doing this for 20, 30 years. We hope to have these recommendations by mid-June. Oh, and another thing to do with water, it's a big deal here. Municipal water modeling has been completed. This is not actually a planned project for this year. It's nowhere in our strategic plans. But in the operations, staff noticed that the lack of a proper water model was a significant barrier to development in town here, especially or specifically in terms of the engineering required for a subdivision or significant development, such as the Riverview development. So we could have come back to council and asked for a capital project of $15,000, $20,000, $25,000 easily, which would be typical for a community this size. But thanks to Don Darling's connections in the professional field, and I guess he leaned on somebody and convinced him, but Associated Engineering offered their database of information about our water systems at no cost to us. And we got a water model done for $2,200 instead of $20,000. So that model is done, it's in our system, and now if somebody wants to figure out what they need to do for servicing their subdivision, we can help them engineer that or hand it over to their engineers to do really quickly at very little cost. So definitely streamlining things. And finally, you've probably noticed that Jones Market has been demolished. The foundation permit has been issued, and now we're just waiting for some final information from the developer so that we can issue the building permit. And like other developments recently approved by council, this development will provide our community with much needed housing options, especially in the rental market. And that's my report for the day.
Thank you, Mr. Denninger. Yeah, just, okay. Appreciate that and welcome, Brandy. Look forward to a long-term relationship. And we know that you're going to give it the best. Appreciate you coming on board. In addition to the staff, Councillor Hoffel.
Thank you, through the mayor. Hello. So, Mr. Denninger, the water model for subdivisions, will that include, because I think VLA is at capacity right now for new builds because of the water, the pipes going down. Would that make a difference to VLA? Or could it?
That is a fantastic example because that's one where we actually struggled. I think it was a year or so ago, where people were just sort of kicking the tires to find out what the development potential was down there. And we couldn't give them a straight answer. The best we could do was guess based on anecdotal evidence of Public Works crew and measurements that have been done here and there throughout the VLA. But there was no properly engineered scientific model of what the current water flows are and what a particular development of any size would cause in terms of its impact to that water source, to the water supply. So all the onus of that water model would have fallen on the developer, even if it were just an individual landowner wanting to create one house on their lot. All the costs would have gone on them, and at best, we would have been able to give them our best guesses as to what our water system would do. All the engineering would be on them. They'd have to do measurements and so forth. So thanks to Mr. Darling and Associated Engineering, all the data they provided us from previous work they've done for the district, we now have a model where we can just plug in the numbers as to we're going to build one residence here or a duplex there, and the model will say exactly what that impact's going to be, so they can now plan appropriately and make the decision as to whether or not it's worth developing at a certain size.
Excellent, thank you.
Anything else? Thank you, Mr. Dennegar. Well done, staff. Okay, we'll move to 19.1. The meeting is open to questions from the media and public. Yes.
Hello.
Hello.
How's it going? It's me again. Just want to make this really quick. Congratulate you on.
Wait, me again. How do you spell
Yes,
it?
oh, I'm so sorry. Johannes from the Lower Chamber of Commerce.
Pulling your leg.
Yeah, no, it's important, proper introductions. So congratulations on an excellent meeting. It's always good to see, local governments working hard. And I will, from a chamber perspective, I will report back to our membership about, some of the decisions the council is making and some of the considerations and add my own flavor to it a little bit. The chamber membership has grown dramatically. We've doubled in the last 3 months, and we're on pace to grow faster. One comment I guess I was asked to make by my board about today's presentation is when you look at the financial statements of the District of Lillooet, and you look at, I believe it's both 2018, where the surplus was $300,000, 2019, where the surplus is $300,000, 2020, where the surplus was $500,000, 2021, where the surplus is $1.3 million. A certain trend starts to emerge. And I appreciate the comments that were made around, the financial position of the district. And it's important to keep that in mind historically. But I think we might be starting to move to a position where we can ask ourselves if there are additional financial resources available because of good decisions that were made, how can those resources be allocated? And I'm sure all of us could come up with a list of projects or initiatives that would require support. I can certainly provide one, and it's getting longer by the day. And so, especially this year, I think it's a good idea to start thinking about what additional resources might there be, how might we be able to allocate them, who might be the most in need for those resources, business community, organizations, nonprofits, all sorts of people, and really make decisions in the future years, for the future years. I think it's really good that the district is in a good financial position, and it should always be in a good financial position. But one of the dangers that I see is the lack of support for some of the initiatives that have been waiting for support for a very long time. And if there are resources available, we should be honest about them, we should distribute them, and we should have good and robust discussions on who should get what and how they should be supported, and so on. So nothing specific for me, but just generally a reminder that I've looked through the financial statements and it's looking really great. So that's good to know. That's it for me.
Thanks, Johannes. Just as a caution, keep in mind that this year is an extraordinary year with COVID in terms of grants and in terms of the amount of works that our district did not get done because of COVID, so on and so. But at the same time, your interests lie in protecting the businesses, and so should you. And I know before I became elected and I was a resident, I always looked to stand behind the chamber as being the ones that have the most influence with the council in terms of, hey, council, you're doing okay, or hey, council, you're not, and here's where we want you to pay attention. I think the strength of this chamber is starting to show right now with your input. Don't get ground down. And certainly on an annualized basis, when we're putting our budgets together, I mean, that's when you can come and have the input. And certainly we would appreciate any of the priorities that you see. And I can imagine, I'm hoping, and it's something I would ask you to look at again with staff, that our strategic plan may cover some of those issues that you're looking at. So thank you for your input. We look forward to continuing it. Anything else? Okay, before I adjourn the meeting, I'd like to extend my appreciation to council and staff. And I'm not going to apologize for the disruption. I think that a bit of that type of happenstance is good to keep us awake. And it also keeps our blood circulating viably. But I appreciate everyone's input, patience, and enjoy these type of meetings, and appreciation goes to staff for supporting us through this. We're making great progress. Council, hang in there, and we're going to do well. So thanks, everyone, and we'll adjourn the meeting at the April 22nd regular council meeting be adjourned. Who moves? Councillor Howe, second Councillor Howe, will call the question. Those in favor, carried. Good. Have a good evening, everyone.